We've got a good number of people here, so I think we're going to get proceedings underway. Thank you everyone for joining us. Welcome to this Exec Leaders Network fireside discussion, where we're looking at leading procurement in this new reality that we're all living through. And I've got three fantastic guests with me tonight. I'm going to start by asking them to introduce themselves, and then I'll tell you a little bit about me as your moderator tonight. Annie, may I be old-fashioned and start with you, and then I shall work around the table.
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Annie Mcmillan. I'm a managing director with KPMG's Procurement Advisory Practice. Happy to be here with you today.
Michael, you next, if I may.
Yeah, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending where you are. My name is Michael van Kohlin. I'm the Chief Procurement Officer at Kohlin Software. I've been in procurement and finance for the best part of 20 years, leading procurement transformation for pretty large global companies. So pleasure to be here.
And last but not least, Deepan.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for taking some time today and joining us. My name is Deepan Crumsey. I'm a partner with KPMG. I lead our U.S. procurement advisory practice and working with clients every day to make procurement a competitive advantage for them. Thank you.
Thank you, three of you. And my name is Mark Chillingworth. I'm the European CIO and CTO community editor. I write for a number of publications and lead forums and these sort of events for partners of the Executive Leaders Network. And it's a real pleasure to be hosting tonight's debate, particularly because it's about procurement, which has been a debate I've tackled a number of times in the past, and it's an area that's been struggling, in my observations of the industry, to cope with this new digital reality in many ways. And nothing, I think, has highlighted the need for digital transformation, as it's often called, the digitizing of the way we do business and work, than COVID-19, which of course has been the main theme of this year. And for the rest of 2020, whatever that brings for us and beyond, finance and procurement are clearly going to have to change. And I think what we're going to explore tonight is how they as roles will step forward and help charge that transformation and become possibly advisors and brokers the way many other parts of the senior leadership team have. To begin our debate, please welcome Deepan back to the stage, as it were, and he's got some key findings and he's going to share with us, and then the three of us will, four of us, will debate those findings. And please do feel free to get involved. Use the chat forum on this application and share your thoughts, your questions, and I'll make sure that our panel share them. Deepan, if I may hand to you, please.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mark. It definitely has been quite a year so far, and although it feels like we're getting a little bit back to normal, there's some uncertainty that's coming up ahead. And it's interesting to kind of reflect back on what was happening pre-COVID. A lot of our clients were really focused on driving 3 to 5% savings a year, increasing automation, driving self-service, and just getting more spend under management. And all of a sudden, those goals still remain critical, but COVID presented a whole new set of realities and change challenges, right? All of a sudden to the forefront, what about workforce safety? And how do we get PPE and different equipment that we might need to keep everybody safe? How do we quickly assess our contractual liabilities? Are there minimum order quantities in some of our contracts that we need to get our hands around, that we need to understand a little bit better? What about our suppliers? How can we ensure supply continuity to make sure that we're driving revenue in the back door as well, right? And of course, driving cost down. Immediately as it hit, we started very quickly trying to figure out how to drive costs down. And so what happened was, at least in the clients that we're working with, most organizations quickly realized that the processes that they had put in place didn't allow them to adjust as quickly as they had imagined. They weren't able to cut spending or impact it as quickly as they could. Things were flowing and they weren't able to get in front of it. They didn't have the visibility to contract data as much as they wanted, and they were left with the manual contracts that they didn't have their hands on. And supplier risk information wasn't available, so they couldn't quite figure out where their pain points might lie. Who should they be worried about? Where is that supply going to be impacted the most? And so it was a pretty big challenge, and most companies realized that we weren't agile enough to kind of get ahead of this thing. And so now, as we're trying to get our hands behind what has happened, get our hands on kind of what's going on and moving forward, we're seeing a lot of organizations adopting to the long-term offsite model. Michael's going to talk a little bit about that today. Focus on margins and cash, making sure that you got supply continuity, driving revenue assurance, and making sure there's kind of operational resilience, right? So minimizing supply chain risk so that you have your supply. So all of this, in addition to what they were doing before, you've got a whole bunch of new things that now we're having to worry about. And so it's quite interesting how organizations are coming together to kind of do this. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. But it's an interesting time. I think it's also given procurement the well-needed recognition that they're responsible for a lot more than driving 3 to 5% cost savings. And I think that's kind of the big lesson that we're getting out of this, and seeing how they're going to do it is going to be a fantastic thing here.
Devan, thank you very much. That's really insightful beginning to tonight's session. And Michael, does what you see out in the marketplace reflect what we've just been shared with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
All good. Thank you.
Sure. So I'll take a stab at this. So we've really seen, kind of the evolution in a short, medium, and long-term perspective, right? Deepan talked about the short-term things around in the procurement space, really, trying to hurry up and just kind of understand what reaction mode we can get into, right? Reducing orders in some areas or increasing orders in some areas due to demand for things that either we don't usually use very much of, and or now you use and you never had before, such as thermometers, cleaning supplies, sterilizing supplies, etc. Just to keep the lights on, because the requirement has become so much more important to do so. Office and computer supplies for employees that are now working from home and hadn't done so in the past. So once that kind of we got over that hump, I would say the next thing is kind of where we are today, right? We're kind of in that medium time frame, and how long will this last, and what do we need to do now, not only to kind of catch up, but to be more strategic as we continue through the pandemic and come out on the other side of this. There's some things that we're really seeing our clients focus on and need to do differently to support the business is really to think about things such as contract management, right? Where in the business are our contracts if we need to get a hold of them? Who has them? Are they in a central repository? Are they not? What's in them, right? Do we have out clauses? Do we have, an understanding about what our payment terms are, so that we can, go back out to the marketplace and work with our suppliers to change those as necessary? Do we have the ability to offer discounts or early pay discounts? And if we do, how far back up into the systems, the payment systems and the ERP systems, do we go to set those up? And how flexible are we? To be able to do that with and for our suppliers. And it's going both directions. You may have some suppliers you want to pay more quickly than you have in the past to ensure you have the supply that you need. But many of our clients are going the other direction as they were already, and thinking about extension of payment terms and what that might look like to their supply base and their relationships. I think the other thing that we're seeing, and we'll talk a little bit more about how this is being enabled, but the other thing we're seeing is really enabling collaboration, both with your business partners and with your suppliers. Everybody's working from home, right? We're all working from our own locations. We have very limited ability to engage and collaborate together. So making sure we have the ability to do so with the appropriate technology that works and is reliable is something that some companies never really had to worry about in their employees' homes. And so that's a focus that has become even more important. But now in the longer term, and I'd say we're about to the point of what's next. We're really organizations are starting to take off the back burner and back onto the front burner their focus on technology enablement. I think a lot of the projects kind of got shelved or slowed that were kind of teed up for the rest of this 2020, but now organizations are starting to see that I hate to use the term, but the new normal, this is not going away. And so what do we really need to be focused on as a priority to continue to enable our procure to pay, our source to pay process, our collaboration, and what do we need to have in place to really engage with our supply base to drive the value that we now know we need. I think a lot of organizations have known and started to prioritize that low cost is not just the driving factor when selecting a supplier. Flexibility in managing changing demand and business needs, And focusing on supplier performance and risk in the supply base are going to be things that become even more important and need to be focused on from a programmatic perspective, but also an enabling technology perspective. So we're going to get into some of that today as well.
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Mark. So I mean, great context. You know, I look at it, you know, from a slight, let's put a slightly different spin on this thing. You know, I think procurement has been for many years been looking at, you know, how do I change the positioning of procurement within the organization? How do I get that seat at the table, and how do I become more strategic? I think that we needed something highly disruptive. Nobody obviously wanted COVID, obviously, but we're in it. Never waste a good crisis. And so I think this has given procurement the opportunity to be looked at from a very different angle. I think a lot of executives have now started looking at procurement as, hey, you guys know more about spend, you know more about contracts, Annie, as you were just saying, and Deepa and you as well. You know, we know more about where the spend is, what the terms are, the payment terms, contractual terms, you know, IP rights, but even more importantly, risk. What do I know about my suppliers? And even more importantly, what do I know about the suppliers of my suppliers, and maybe even their suppliers? So procurement was all of a sudden now catapulted and elevated to the boardroom from the basement, and some were still in the basement. And now the expectation has changed. The operating model has to change. And so what I'm hearing from my fellow practitioners out there is, you know, yes, we still need to do business continuity. Yes, we still need to ensure supply chain, and that has been extremely disruptive, as Deepan kind of started and teed it off. But how do we stay at that strategic level? And what skill sets do we need? And what operating model do we need? And what talent do we need? And what are the gaps? So what is top of mind is what I'm hearing from our customers, from fellow practitioners out there, is a lot around operating model and what should we look like, and what skill sets do we need, because it has changed. In 6 months, what would have taken us maybe another 5 or 10 years, it happened in 6 months, and now we're at the table. But now the C-suite is looking at procurement. And so I think that is very exciting for us and very empowering, and is opening up a whole new avenue. And now it's the question for procurement, say, what do we need? And one of the things, and we'll get into that in just a second, is to think about what tools do we now need? Like, what platforms do we need? What do we need to digitize, and et cetera? And we'll get to that in a second. But I mean, that's the stuff that has been challenging and exciting and offers opportunity, and is really exciting to be part of today.
Annie and Michael, thank you. Really interesting insights. And I hear similar things on my travels about that agility, that clarity, and that knowledge chain that actually we all take for granted in any organization, don't we? Oh, such and such looks after that for us, but such and such is dependent on someone else. And this has really exposed that need to be always aware of who our partners are and how much value they bring. Procurement digitization, in many ways, it seems to me it's been accelerated by COVID. It was taking place anyway, and it's accelerated, and all three of you have very much said that. But that acceleration is only going to continue as we work towards whatever the new normal is. What is vital to consider in the digitization and the acceleration of that change in procurement? Shall I start with you again, Deepan, and work our way around?
Yeah, no, actually, maybe Annie starts first on this one, and then I can jump in right off of her.
Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
So from a digitization standpoint, I think there's a continued focus on where is my information, right? Where do I find the information? Where can I find all the data to make good decisions across the business? And, you know, I think there's been a good momentum around procure to pay spend, or my payment spend. But what we're now seeing is, and I started with it earlier, is around contracts. Where's my information in the business around contracts? We're working with clients right now to help them figure that out. I'll give you a few examples. You know, one is, you know, we need to get access to all of our information, right? All of our contracts in one place. That's the really easy one, right? Dump everything in one spot and we'll figure it out. But that's really not enough anymore, as we talked about. We need to be able to then access specific clauses and know where they are in each contract so we can make changes to and or get decisions made more easily across a full category of spend, a full supply, or a full supply base. And so we're working with clients now to standardize contract templates so that every contract template that they use for a specific category has, section 13 is the same, and we can more easily get to that section 13 and understand that that's the payment term clause, for example. How are we doing that? Again, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of documents in some organizations, and so you can't just dump it into an Excel spreadsheet and hope for the best anymore. So we're using AI to mine these contracts, to find the language, to standardize the language, and to be able to make good interpretation of what we have in our contracts more effectively and more quickly. The other thing that we're doing in that same space is, again, capturing contracts from everybody in the business. You need to then be able to parent-child relate them to each other. So you may have a master services agreement with supplier A and 55 statements of work, but they're all over the business. So again, using AI to capture that information and build that tree and that relationship structure for you in that repository. And then more importantly, uploading it into a repository that then you can use to make good decisions and find information, have renewal notifications, have notifications that if you've made a decision in a contract clause that varies from the standard, that you see that, you understand that, you're getting the appropriate engagement from both the business and legal through an automated workflow to allow those decisions to be made and captured. So those are the kinds of things that we certainly are seeing more important, and there's more of an ROI now than ever related with that, given what we've just gone through in the previous few weeks. So, yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say, I think Deepan has some other great examples.
Yeah, no, I think really good points, right? I mean, contract data is essentially becoming gold at this point, right? Trying to mine it, trying to find out exactly what the variances to the norm are and where the potential risks are for the business, so that you can get kind of in front of it. And that's what CFOs are looking for. CEOs are looking for that information, and that's the time for procurement to jump in and drive value in a different way that may not have been a historical focus area, right? Even though we were somewhat responsible for contracts with legal, we may not have been asked to do some of those things, and now we're being called on to do that as being the forefront of contracts. But I think with that comes managing your supplier information. How do you manage that external data? I think almost everybody on this call can likely look at their master data and go, wow, our supplier information is just all over the board. Our vendor information, we have duplicates, we have incomplete information, we don't have the right contacts, we're not able to get them into the systems, we're not able to drive supplier enablement because of the lack of information. And so as we start to situate some of the other data in the system, it quickly comes to, how do we manage our supplier information? How do we get that to be more standardized and accurate? And how do we then start to use that to drive our supplier risk management processes? Once we have an accurate data set there, we can start driving through those processes. So before you transact, if that's where you put that control point, you're able to validate that that supplier, in fact, has passed your risk requirements and can, in fact, be transacted with. So that's becoming another focus area. I was just chatting with a big pharma this week, and one of their big focus areas is how do we get a handle on all this data that's in multiple systems and apply our risk management governance policies to it, because right now it's just so difficult to do, and we're duplicating these efforts across the globe all over the place. And so it's about looking at where that data is stored, how can we standardize it, and then how can we apply some of the risk governance components that we need to do. So that's an interesting space. Historically, most organizations have looked at it and said, it's too big, it's too difficult, it's too challenging to kind of do. But a lot of AI advancements have happened that allow us to mine through this data and really drive towards some standardization with a little bit more simplicity these days. So it's a pretty interesting area as well. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, obviously, we know a thing or two about business spend management, but in all honesty, when this thing hit, I think a lot of companies still realized how paper-based they are, and how little information you actually have at your fingertips to make the right business decisions. Now, whether that's understanding your suppliers, their ownership structure, the reliance on those suppliers for your own business continuity. But also when certain companies and certain suppliers and even countries started to produce different things than what they were doing before the crisis hit. So India went in lockdown, certain factories under government mandate now all of a sudden had to start producing different things. And to very quickly then pivot and understand what that means for your company and the continuity of your company, a lot of companies were scratching their heads. So one of the things that what we're seeing is, having that resilience and the agility to do that in a seamless way. I think that really changed the game. From a procurement standpoint, what we care about a few things, right? We care about governance, compliance, control, and visibility. And if you can say to all four of those that you have it, then you very quickly are going to find yourself in trouble. And so the digitization journey has just catapulted. I think the demand for digitization and the use of AI and big data and starting to make sense out of the data has just accelerated over the past 6 months. Procurement is asking for it. We need to have an end-to-end platform. We need to have things like risk and have the ability to manage the risk of your suppliers. And how do you stay on top of those suppliers? And the platforms are out there. The solutions are out there. And I think it just accelerated what was already happening. And as I said earlier, with that change of positioning in procurement, now is also the time for procurement to start making some demands and say, well, gone are the days where I rely on some big ERP, where I get some spend queue with a bunch of invoices and suppliers that have no commodity structure. There is no uniqueness. And now I need to figure out what the spend is. I mean, those days are behind us. Just using UNSPSC to classify your suppliers, I mean, that's 5-10 years ago. You got to be way more agile and way more nimble and way more have that speed to market when it comes to managing and driving more value out of your spend.
Really good points there, Michael. I think the one other thing I would call out is just content, right? Content is king.
Totally.
And absolutely streamlining the use of how you're using catalogs and the hosted contracts that you've got in your application, punch outs, et cetera, and streamlining it so it makes it easier for the end users who might not be on site anymore, might not have access to ask people questions. They want to be able to go on, find the item that they're looking for, purchase it through a simplified approval chain, and kind of move forward. And the organizations and clients that we've been working with who have implemented some of that stuff are finding it a lot easier for folks at home to get the things they need very quickly, in addition to kind of some of the other supplies they may need for manufacturing facilities or whatever else. So
couldn't agree more. If you still had to go back to the office to sign your checks, then I highly encourage you to look at what's out there, because that is really old school. Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Yeah.
We're hearing.
I was just gonna insert one other thought there. If you're thinking about the processes that you might have in place and the policies that you have in place from a procurement standpoint, another conversation we've had with a large client these days is around the ability to order things and have them shipped other places, such as your home. That's in the past been a no-no. It's been a control issue. It's been a concern. Lock that down. Now we have to have the flexibility to allow those changes with an approval and kind of go outside our normal policy comfort zone. So really, even just thinking about procurement policies and practices is important at this point as well.
Totally.
We hear increasingly about the power of the community and the role it will play. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what it's going to do for organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely encourage those who have not heard yet, but our Chief Executive Officer, Rob Bernstein, just published a book around community. Just a quick plug here, but I'd encourage you to read it. Communities are going to drive businesses going forward. I think that has been happening for a little while now. I think that just the level of collaboration that we're seeing between suppliers, customers, and the communities that they support, I think that's been a movement that's been happening, and I think it's just, again, has been accelerated. We're all in this thing together, right? And if you could kind of translate that to technology, we have a community of more than 1,700 customers. We manage more than $2 trillion worth of spend. And the biggest challenge that I've always had in my career in procurement, that it's been more than 10 years, is you felt like you're at it alone, right? Like, I'm the only one that has this problem, and you always attacked it as if like this was the first time. And I think what Coupa has been able to do is to build a community, and based on our community, you can drive intelligence and very prescriptive access to data points that allow me to benchmark my performance and my spend and the way I manage my spend on the contract, PO cycle times, AP approval times, electronic invoicing, and there's a whole slew of things that I can now benchmark my performance against the best in our community. And not just that, because that maybe you were able to do, but it also prescribes me with the things that I can do to become best in class. And I think that latter part is where the community comes in. And now with the data at your fingertips and with the power of AI that I frankly 24 months ago didn't really understand what AI was supposed to do. And now that you have all that data at your fingertips, it's just a competitive advantage. And if you don't have that today, you are going to be left behind. So communities are absolutely going to drive the future of our business. I 100% believe that.
I think the basics, we're getting a lot of client requests talking about group purchasing organizations, which, is a little bit of an older term, but it's coming back. Because a lot of the clients we work with, even within their own companies, multiple business units are using completely different processes, different contracts, different small parcel providers, things that are low-hanging fruit in terms of driving cost savings. And as we came into this pandemic and we started looking for where you can go and get these cost savings, procurement now was able to get up ahead of the business units and go, guys, if we do this, we can drive savings across the organization, and all of a sudden give procurement a little bit more credibility and bringing some of those solutions to light. But we're seeing a lot of that interest, in platforms like Coupa are helping to get companies there more quickly than they could do by themselves, which is cool.
Yeah, and the other thing I do want to add is, I know for a lot of folks here that are listening in, diversity, inclusion, sustainability, those are all things that are top of mind for all of us. Part of risk and de-risking your supply chain is diversity. That is an answer to it. And again, the prescriptiveness and the power of your community are going to help you accelerate your strategy around that. And it's extremely compelling. And the solutions are out there. So you're not at it alone.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that is changing is having that information at various points in the process, right? So, we'll run a risk profile on a supplier at the a point of sourcing. We'll make a selection. We'll go through contracting. We'll assume that supplier is the same level of risk as it was 3 months ago, but in today's world, that may not be true. We put a contract in place, we may not purchase against it for another 4 or 5 months. And having the ability to check that risk profile or those risk components that are specifically critical to your business at every point in the process has become even more critical as well.
And it's fascinating to listen to that, to the use of the word community. In many other sectors, they talk about ecosystems, but actually community, as Michael and you, all three of you, put so very clearly, there's so much more to it, isn't it? That ecosystem doesn't lend itself to diversity. It feels a little bit old-fashioned now as a term, doesn't it?
Right.
Final question for me before I throw it open. We've got some good questions coming in from the audience, but final question for me is, what must be considered as procurement adjusts to the virtual environment, which all four of us are working in right here, right now?
I can go first if you want. Look, I think in a lot of ways, I think permanently, many of us are going to potentially be working from home or in a 50-50 role or something that's going to be a little bit altered even for many years to come. So I think the change for many folks is going to be somewhat permanent and is going to last a long time. But I think the basics of what we need to do as procurement individuals and professionals, it remains similar. We need to stay connected to the different business stakeholders. We need to understand what their business is, and we need to be bringing them value before they understand it. How many times have we walked into areas of spend like marketing, which are very tightly controlled and held? Now, if procurement can bring unique insights into that conversation that allow the marketing organization, wow, I didn't really think that we should actually separate these two into two different contracts and we can get a different level of service, or those types of things, what's going on in the market, it makes us more relevant. And so we need to continue to remain as close as we can to the business stakeholders, understand what's coming up, and be able to get in front of it so that we can drive value to the bottom line. Staying more and more engaged with your suppliers as outside of the four-wall stakeholders for us is going to be more and more critical. And to do that, you need to implement some of the technologies that allow you to get access and drive communications to your suppliers so that they know exactly where you're heading. I think the last thing I would say is the C-suite, becoming more relevant to the C-suite. The historical metrics and SLAs that we use are, hey, we save 5%, we save 7%, that kind of thing. How about looking at diversity and inclusion, as kind of Michael mentioned, as a metric? How about looking at what our supplier risk program kind of uncovered that allowed us to stay away from a potentially risky proposition as a metric? And bringing some of those things to light to round out what procurement's doing to move away from just a cost savings focused into something a little bit broader.
Annie.
I think to enable that, we're going to need to really rethink our operating model, as Michael mentioned earlier. We are going to need to identify business owners, right? The category managers are going to have to be business owners as much as they are managing their category, because they have to be sticky to the business and they have to have it on their to-do list every day to stay connected, and most often virtually. So creating that environment, creating that landscape so that it's just part of the week or the day that you have to make sure you have an opportunity to check in. Every interaction these days is so deliberate. You have to put time on someone's calendar. You have to give them an agenda. And when you get on that Teams call or WebEx or whatever you're using, Zoom, you start with your agenda. You don't remember to make small talk or build that relationship and just really kind of rethinking what the role of that person is in that business, in that procurement function. I think very similarly, who's responsible for the supplier relationships, and what responsibility do you have? There's responsibility in procurement, there's responsibility in the business, and there's probably responsibility elsewhere, right? So making sure that those are really well defined. It's still very important to have those multiple touch points, but making sure that they're orchestrated in some way, but yet they seem natural, and that you're sharing information that you do have to make good decisions about your supply base. You don't want somebody using supplier A in one part of the business and the other part of the business using them as well and not talking to each other. So really marrying those folks up is another newer role, or becoming more important role in procurement as well.
Yeah, I think they're all great points. I think we talked about technology a little bit, right? And just having, it is out there. It's not, it is there to go end to end. So I highly encourage everybody that's on this phone call to start having that digital mindset. Access to data, usability of your platform, driving adoption, so that you can truly start to manage your end-to-end process. I think that is paramount. Driving that conversation, procurement leads it, right? We've been waiting for something disruptive, so this is our time. I mean, please don't stick your head in the sand or try to hide behind maybe silos that were there in the past. I think companies are looking for edges. Companies are looking for competitiveness. During a crisis, there will be opportunity. And let's make sure you can capitalize on them. So build agility in your supply chain. I highly encourage you all to look at that. And we should be driving this. Procurement is uniquely positioned to drive this conversation. The tools are out there. It does require us to step up our game. But I think we've been wanting to do that for a long time. And procurement, I've said for several years, has always been one of those professions that it's kind of been lagging. Finance went through transformation, and HR and IT and marketing, and they all had to see in their titles. And I think the last function that really had to take this elevation is procurement. I think this is the perfect time for us. Again, nobody wanted this, but this is the time. And driving the digitization, it's going to set up your company for success. It's going to open up opportunity. And it allows procurement to start focusing on innovation through your supply chain. And I think that's where the future is of procurement, because then some people might say, okay, well, if we digitize all of that, what am I going to do with procurement? Well, we are positioned to drive innovation because we understand the business, we understand our strategy, we know what the suppliers can do, and we can have some really unique value propositions for our organizations. And that's, I think, where procurement should focus. By being enabled by the technology that's out there. I think that is going to be the future.
And building on that is a really interesting observation / question here about AI, particularly tools like UiPath. I've seen it. They've been widely adopted by finance teams who've been through some really interesting modernizations, transformations of their business processes. But it sounds like procurement isn't going there, and actually possibly the three of you, your organizations, maybe need to help them step up that. Is that an observation you would concur with, and how would you respond to that? Deepan, I'll start with you, if I may.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So I think there absolutely is still a place, for automation, for, AI in the procurement space. The organizations that we see it most with are organizations with complex ERP structures that have data moving between multiple different systems to kind of keep them into sync, and AI can really help to kind of diminish the manual moves of data from one system to another, where you're doing kind of a swivel tail technology. Now, if you have a little bit more of a simplified structure, I think organizations like Coupa and other best-of-breed applications in the procurement space are doing a really nice job of embedding AI into their tools. They're ahead of the market. They're seeing what's coming, what types of things that organizations need to drive that next level of value, and so they're building that in. But there's always going to be a place for it, where in the complex organization, that's going to allow us to drive paperwork out, to drive manual interfaces and touch points out, and to reduce the steps. And I think the big thing that's going to come in terms of the revolution of AI, in my opinion, is as we get more and more historical data, and you can allow the application to actually look back at the last 500 decisions and determine that 98.9% of the time this was the output when these 17 factors were in play. And most organizations don't have a clean enough set of data, but I think it's coming, and organizations try to establish that framework and that architecture now so that they can build that data set, so in a couple of years they're ready for it.
Anything you'd add there from your observations?
Oh, no, I think I was just thinking, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. So I think the other thing that I would add is, as far as AI is concerned, you've got to dip your toe in, right? I think it's historically, procurement organizations have been scrappy, right? We'll just go figure it out, we'll get it done. So it does take a little bit of an investment. I think that does scare folks away a little bit. But what we've seen is exactly as Deepan started to articulate, is once it gets going, it's like a snowball effect, right? It takes a little bit of work, and then the value is just exponential.
Yeah, and I just add, I think what finance did, and this is several years ago, is focus on AP automation, digitization of the incoming invoicing, and said, well, okay, problem solved. We've automated our process, but that is not data that procurement cares about, right? I don't care where an invoice gets booked from a general ledger account to XYZ cost center 345. That's not relevant for me. What I need to know is, what did we buy? Who do we buy it from? What am I paying? What do I know about the commodity? And AP automation is a part of what we call end-to-end, right? It starts with sourcing, then it goes to contracting, and then the rec to PO process. And then, yes, I'll get an invoice. But I've said many years, like, approving an invoice is after the fact. It's rearview mirror. I can't influence that. What I want to influence is the point of purchase, and even before that. And so that's where there's some things that I'd like this audience to take away is, look at the process end to end. Don't just look at CLM as a process and sourcing as a process and AP automation and maybe analytics. It is an end to end process. It starts with a sourcing event because you need something, and it ends with an invoice that now gets classified somewhere. But what I want to do is I want to influence that entire chain, and I want to do that in one end to end process. And I'm saying this as a finance guy, where AP automation was great, but that was great 10 years ago, right? And if that's still what you believe is innovation today, then again, you are behind what the market is doing.
If I may throw in a supplementary question, building on some of what you were observing there, Annie and Deepan, is I was working on a report this week that talked about AI, and these tools won't eradicate roles, they'll eradicate various tasks. Is that very much what you see happening in procurement as well? Actually, that repetitive and low value, effectively, tasks can be automated and actually help procurement professionals deliver more value to their organizations?
I think you can actually get in front, right? So almost proactive compliance. If you think about some of the travel and expense tools, now when you log an expense, it rectifies what city you were in, where, so there's data around where you were physically located when that expense was used and where the credit card transaction, right? So there's that kind of thing. In supplier master data, Now there are supplier masters that can go out and query whether individuals in an organization have a relationship with somebody on the board or somebody senior level in that particular supplier to identify where a particular fraud may happen. So we're starting to see more proactive compliance that I think is going to come out of it. And that's going to be game changing because some of that stuff is happening behind the scenes. It's taking away some of that manual effort that's needed today. And frankly, there's no way any one company can do all of those things manually. And so that's just adding value to the organization without even having to think about it. So I think there's a play there.
Yeah, and it's about, sorry, Anya, go ahead, ladies first, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was going to go a little tactical to answer the question as well. So, you think about the example that was made around 98% of, the situation always ended in X action, right? So especially in the AP side, if you've got a big queue of invoices that need to be cleared, that team is just basically going through the motions right now. And, using AI and clearing that queue based on the rules and the experiences that have led us to take that same action in the past allows those individuals time and the energy and the focus to really go back and understand what the problems are that are causing the business the biggest issues, right? So it could be invoice tolerance issues. It could be, payment term issues. It could be data, often master data issues. So right now, those things are just being, kind of addressed in reaction mode and not really solved. So back to kind of getting in a position to be more proactive than reactive all the way across the chain. With some of those more strategic activities Deepan was talking about and some of the more tactical activities that just are part of the business.
Yeah, no, I kind of was going down that same path, so I couldn't agree more. And I think the other thing is like AI. I mean, we use AI on a day-to-day basis, right? I mean, think about things like Netflix or think about Google Maps. I mean, it's all AI, right? It's all based on data, and now somebody will tell you, or somebody being the platform, what is the optimal outcome for whatever problem is that you're trying to solve, whether it's going from A to B, or whether it's, hey, I've got this purchase that I'm about to do, and we, through some guided buying, we're going to actually prescribe to you where you should buy this from based upon whatever data points you have given me. And that could be diversity, that could be risk, that could be a whole slew of different things that are relevant to your business and your business alone, but we'll be using the power of the data and the power of our community to really ensure that you get it from the right place with the right risk profiles that are in compliance with your business rules. And that's where AI just has some really, really strong use cases. And what we're seeing also in our platform for sure.
Good points. Another question coming is, what, if any, insights do you have in regards to labor costs as a result of COVID-19? I'll follow the same route and start with you, Deepan.
So labor costs, I think organizations in certain industries that we're working with are absolutely looking to reduce headcount and kind of optimize the workforce. And so, there's some movement towards shared services or managed services or offshoring of certain roles that can be managed offsite. We're increasingly seeing things like category management and buy desk type functions move to other countries as well, because a lot of that information happens to be available in technology. You can research it from anywhere, and we have very skilled labor across the globe that can help us with that kind of thing, right? But I do believe that the new workforce is going to require a different set of skills. And I personally feel as though, that 30-year category manager that just knew one category and really supply-based, things are moving so quickly now that it's difficult for one person to have all that knowledge. And organizations are increasingly having to rely on external partners who are benchmarking, providing different insights, providing new and different strategies that you might not have thought of. And so, although there's going to be a need for different skill sets, it's going to be skill sets that you can partner more, increasingly analytical, understanding how you can use technology to better drive value for the organization, those types of things. And they're in high demand. And I think you'll see in the procurement space, the folks that I'm trying to hire, it's not that simple to find those folks with all those different skills.
Yeah, I'd also say, I think what COVID has done is that companies have now realized that work from home, is not impossible. I think there were lots of companies out there that never thought that they would have their workforce predominantly be working from home. Now there's companies who say you never have to come back to the office, That's what's going to happen. Like a lot of people that were living in these high cost areas, like San Francisco or London, or pick a big city where, 2-bedroom apartments were like $5,000 a month, and people were just living, because that's where the job was. Well, now I can actually do that in North Carolina, where my cost, so I think that there's actually, it's going to be interesting, and I'm not in that field, but I think you're going to see a lot of people moving away from the bigger cities. Of course, also having access to maybe a backyard and stuff like that and more space. So I think it could be very interesting to see what it does for labor costs, because cost of living, of course, is going to be adjusted. Will that have an impact on labor costs? Yes or no? Again, that's maybe HR, and I don't want to, I don't want to get down to that rabbit hole. But I think it'll be interesting what that does to cost of labor. The second thing I do want to add is I agree, Deepan, with what you're saying. But also as I'm thinking as a practitioner, I think contingent workforce and contingent labor is going to spike at some point. And you as a company need to think about, are you equipped, and do you have the tools? Do you have the infrastructure to manage a significant increase in your contingent workforce? Again, once the new normal hits and whatever that looks like, because that will happen. And we can't sit back and just wait for that to come. I think we owe it to our companies to think about that. And do we have a contingent workforce platform? Do we have something that allows us to properly manage that? I think it's going to be really paramount to manage labor cost.
Yeah, kind of a separate spin off that same dialogue is the opportunities that it now opens for individuals to, find roles outside of where they live, right? You might have opportunities now to work in New York when you don't have to live there, right? And so, just speaking with various professionals in the space in the last few weeks myself, that's what we're finding. A lot of organizations, post a position as a must be here position, but then after a few months, they look at it and say, well, I really like my options, but they're all over the country and does it really matter anymore? So I think it really does open the door for the right people to move into these roles that are also changing.
And there was a KPMG study, wasn't there, about 2 weeks ago with CEOs who said that recruitment and retention had actually improved during COVID because they were able to recruit people from all four corners of whichever nation they're trading in, or retain people knowing that they wanted to exit whichever city, to Michael's point, they were currently living in. So it's changing tack. Another great question here is, what will be the leading practice in supplier risk management going forwards? Who would like to start that one? Annie?
So I think there are going to be a few leading practices in this space. One is, I think having a formal program with a defined governance model, people who are doing the role full time is going to become a legal practice or a more standard practice. I think so many organizations have kind of done this as a side job, or when they get to it, or the 12-question survey that goes out once a year, or name your minimal input activity. But I think it's going to become much more important as we go forward to really focus in this area, get the tools and the capabilities in place. Again, gone is Excel when it comes to providing this information and then putting it into a repository to never look at again. You need to have something that's integrated into your procure-to-pay process, that's accessible, that is predictive, and also that provides you with information versus you asking for it. Right? So when we have various things, notifications set, parameters set for, if there's this many pings in the marketplace, in the news on a supplier, you get notified. If there's changes in, their board of directors or their executive level C-suite, get notified. There's suppliers of theirs that are in jeopardy, then that's also highlighted for you. So you're not actually having to find that information, and it's just part of the process that's being fed into the life cycle. I think that's going to be a very important part of what comes about the next 6 to 18 months.
Yeah, I think you're bang on. Yeah, I mean it's not just the once a year, or hey, I'm about to run this RFP. I'm going to ask them a set of questions. I'll determine risk, ownership structure, cyber risk, reputational, like all that stuff. But that's one thing. But the second thing, it's exactly what you're saying, is how do you make that ongoing and continuous? and not just a once a quarter or once a year, or no, you actually need to know on a continuous basis, because they are moving so rapidly, what's happening with my suppliers. And again, I also want to emphasize not just your suppliers, but even their suppliers. What do I know about my top 10? I'd say to procurement practitioners out there listening, when is the last time you had a real strategic conversation with your supplier and really understand what's driving their business and how their business is doing and how their suppliers are doing? And it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but the tools are out there, and the solutions are out there, and you owe it to your company to have the right answers and look your CFO in the eye and say, hey, I know that my top 10 supply, like whatever the number is, and do your own supplier segmentation. I'm happy to help and reach out after this, but you got to do it. You got to do your homework. You can't sit back and wait for something to hit. It's bang on what you just said.
Yeah, I totally agree with a couple of the things, right? So having the bots and the web crawlers that are out there mining information on chat boards, social media, so you can get ahead of any adverse events that one of your major suppliers may be facing, so that you can make decisions a little bit more quickly. Simplifying the questionnaires so that they're auto-collected and you're able to gather that information. I think the big thing in this supplier risk space is, what do you do with all this information? Let's say 3 of the questionnaires now don't have a passing rating. Yet it's a very critical supplier to your business. How is it that you're going to help that organization, your supplier, to kind of meet the risk threshold that you have in place? Are you going to work with them directly? What kind of people are you going to need into your organization to be able to work with potentially hundreds or thousands of suppliers to meet some of these things? And how are you going to manage that? Because one of the things that I see in supplier risk management organizations is that they're understaffed. Because it's easier to get this information. Now you have all of it, and now you're forced to do something with it. And if you don't have the people that can help you get through it, what happens is the time to approve a supplier starts getting really long. That starts impacting the business. And again, procurement's image and reputation is impacted because people feel as though they can't get the job done as quickly as they need to. So there's that big aspect of after the fact that I think a lot of clients we're working with are trying to grapple with.
Yeah.
And please, there is still time to send in any further questions to those of you tuning in that have. So next question is, what is the best approach for procurement leaders to demonstrate the value of a transformation to the C-level, knowing that they have other areas that are being transformed and probably other priorities? We're going to start with you
this time.
You want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
I can take it. Yeah, I mean, I have some scars along the way, so please don't think that this is a straight shot. But I think the most important thing that we bring to the table, it's all about visibility, and it's driving value. And the more we talk about value and not about cost savings, but it's about value, and value can mean different things. It can mean more quality, faster acceleration to your strategic objectives by uncovering resource inefficiencies. And that sounds maybe like a promo on TV, but that's really what procurement does. It's not about cost saving. It's about driving more value and extracting more value out of your spend. Every company on the planet has spend. That's pretty easy. And how do you optimize that spend? And how do you optimize that with different components? And one component of that is risk. How do you manage risk? Do you want to be single source? Do you want to have optionality? What prescriptiveness can I provide to the business? That's one element. But another element is innovation. How do I drive innovation? That's not procurement sitting in a lab coming up with the next thing. No, we have all these suppliers. And if you ask them the right questions, they are highly collaborative and they want to collaborate with you. And so asking the right, so procurement wears many different hats. That's what I'd say. What is procurement's role? It's wearing different hats. And if you articulate that to the business and you articulate that to the C-suite and say, look, we are uniquely positioned to be that spider in the web that can combine business strategy with business continuity, with innovation, with risk, with governance, compliance, control, all those things. That's what procurement brings. And if we talk about that, then I'd be shocked if there's any C-level executive that wouldn't at least give procurement the opportunity to demonstrate the value that we can create. Sorry, there was a bit of a spin for procurement, but I hope it made sense.
No, Mike, I think you're right. I think the other there's the old-fashioned business case, and then there's the business case you just articulated, right? I mean, the answer at the C-level is a business case. It's a value case. It's not just a business dollars and cents case anymore. And so I think it's important to certainly talk about all of those various components, and then talk about the risk to not doing it, right?
Yeah.
What value do you lose, and how far into the business and far-reaching does that go? Because it's not just about what I can't deliver to you this year. It's what I can't help you deliver to the outcome of the overall organization because of those things we just talked about.
Totally.
Yeah, I think business cases, the more tactical answer that I would think about, right? So there's a number of different categories, whether there be sourcing savings, spend visibility savings, because you can get access to more visibility, you can drive more sourcing savings, or better management of that spend. Even just implementing controls around approvals may lead to denied requisitions, which allow you to kind of save money or cost avoid. Dynamic discounting, which may allow you to obtain more discounts from some of the suppliers that you may not be, getting them from today. Transactions on catalog. And I think the big thing for me is educating the C-suite on what those individual metrics actually mean. I mean, everybody is coming to the table with some sort of business case with a number of factors. And if you go into something like, well, why does it matter spend under contract? Okay, well, this is why it matters. Let's take one category, for example. Last year, we had $10 million in spend, $5 million was on contract, $5 million was off contract. That on-contract spend was 10% off of retail rates, and so we got a discount every time we used them, but 50% of it didn't. And you actually take data from your previous spend analyses to show that this is what's happening today. In the future, because we would implement this type of control, because it'd be a secondary approval if you didn't use that supplier, because this catalog would come up as a preferred catalog and be posted on your web homepage, those are going to drive spend of that supplier, and we're going to get to 76%, which might be the benchmark for that category. And what that's going to save you when that $2.6 million actually comes in with another additional 10%, right? And so over time, with all those different categories, you can actually build that puzzle, because a lot of CFOs may not have a full understanding of what some of those makeups are in the business case. So educating them and getting them behind it will lead to a better outcome as well, because now you have a couple of metrics that you can easily quantify during and post-implementation that allows them to go, okay, got it. You went from 25 to 75 spend under management. I believe that it got 7 or 8%. It's when they don't believe it is when the challenges start,
And a final question from myself is, when I talk to business technology leaders, some of them say procurement doesn't quite understand the change in their world, the agility, the way they're spinning up projects using software suppliers or team suppliers for very short periods of time, very bursty type business activity now, and that procurement hasn't kept pace with that. Are they correct? Are they incorrect? Is there a change happening?
Yeah, no, I think that procurement still has work to do. Yeah, I mean, like I said from the start, in the earlier part, the expectations on procurement have changed. They have changed over the past 6 months, and procurement has to step up. This is like, we have to step up. We have to elevate our game. I do know that the reputation of procurement in general is not, let's just say, always awesome. And that's for us to change. Nobody's going to change it for us. We need to change, but we need to ask the right questions. Once we demonstrate to our business partners that we are there to accelerate their strategy and we're not there to cut their budget, I think that half the battle is won. And I, in my career, have been very fortunate that I've had stakeholders that were willing to give me the ear. But if I would walk in there and say, I'm here to cut your budget in half, then trust me, there was no way that they would want to work with me. But if I talk about value, and how can I accelerate their strategic objectives and get them to their end goal faster, the door's open. Who does not want to do that, right? But we need to elevate our game, 100%.
Great point. Annie, do you have anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think you're exactly right, Michael. I mean, I think there's a couple levels of value that's being added, right? So is procurement coming in and delivering a 7-step sourcing process? Yes, sure. There's going to be value that's driven out of that. You're using tools, templates, you have a formal negotiation strategy, there's going to be some value there. The second level, if you have full category knowledge in that particular area, you can bring leading practices about what the industry is doing, what your competitors are doing, what those suppliers are doing. If you go into a contingent labor, you understand the different job profiles and how you should be classifying them and all that, you can bring another level of value. And then thirdly, If you actually have the infrastructure and you've built a tool set that allows you to get that spend under contract and then give that spend data back to the organization to show exactly how they're spending their money, where their budgets have been utilized, what suppliers are being utilized, what months they're using this budget in, et cetera, that allows you to kind of close the loop that says, okay, we've helped along the way and we're giving data back that they may not have had previous access to. Now all of a sudden it changes the game. Procurement is an advisor to the business versus just a one point in time kind of a come in and execute this contract or PO type of a person.
Yeah,
And
I was going to say, just to put a pin on it, my clients have been shocked at the way they can use that information with their C-suite. It validates everything they take to them from that point on. So they can, take that information, show where they're spending the money, show what they can provide to make good decisions, and the rest is really an open conversation versus a challenge every time they come into that door.
Wonderful. Deepan, Annie, Michael, thank you for sharing your insights. A really fascinating discussion. To all of those of you who tuned in and shared your questions, again, thank you very much. Really useful, really insightful debate, and interesting to see some of the issues from technological to positioning the organisation that are troubling you. It's been a fascinating debate, and we look forward to welcoming you to one of these again soon. Good night.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care, guys. Cheers.